Hopefully you can all hear me. Welcome to It's Belgrade, the second time in Belgrade. Hopefully you all had a great swim to come here. Today I'm going to talk about what it means to fail successfully. Before I start on that subject, a quick intro. So my name is Nenad, last name hard to pronounce. I'm the co-founder of DeFi Saver, Solidity developer since 2017, and this is my second time coming here at IT Belgrade, essentially to rant about my feelings and my opinions on the crypto industry. So, as I mentioned, what does it mean to fail successfully? Well, one of the things, firstly, that's kind of my favorite error to get when the task failed successfully. The second thing, it was kind of an answer to the question I got a few weeks back. It was in which areas as a community have we actually failed? Given that we're all now at Ethereum conference in 2024, obviously we haven't failed in a sense that the industry is alive and well. We're all working on the new and innovative technologies we have here. But what were the promises when we first started as an industry 10, 15 years ago, which we haven't kept up with? So to answer the question, you kind of have to figure out what the right question is, right? So if we're trying to figure out if we failed at something, let's first figure out what we were trying to accomplish all along. So peer-to-peer electronic cash system, right? So that was the name of the Bitcoin white paper in 2009. Building a decentralized world computer, that was essentially kind of the tagline for the Ethereum when it first came out. Banking the unbanked, or debanking the banked, or any combination of the words with banked and unbanked, right? Building the new financial system, digital store of value, when we realized that nobody's buying coffee with Bitcoin, then it was a store of value, right? And of course, pumping on shitcoins. All kind of worthwhile things to try and accomplish. But everything here, it has kind of a different connotation, right? But it has a few things in common, except maybe the last one, pumping the shitcoins. But as far as the rest, the serious ones, what we're actually trying to build with the world computer, with smart contracts, with decentralized peer-to-peer currency, essentially we're building decentralized systems, right? We're building systems that are transparent and open source. We're building systems using cryptography. We're building systems that have privacy features and in general trying to be trustless, right? And they're all built on those fundamental ideas. And those fundamental ideas are actually, like, they came about and people were working on them way before even Bitcoin started, right? So before we try and answer the question, like, in what areas we've succeeded, in what we've failed, let's do kind of a quick history lesson and jump back in time and see how it all got started, right? So 13.8 billion years ago, the universe was created. Generally, it was considered a bad decision and a lot of people complained about it. But yeah, I probably went too far ahead. So let's jump into 1976. The period about 30 billion years, a few notable things happened, but we're not going to talk about it now. But an interesting thing happened in 1976. Invention of public key cryptography, right? While it doesn't seem like a huge innovation, right? We often don't talk about it, like the Bitcoin white paper, for example. The paper called The New Directions in Cryptography were released, and the initial idea to public key cryptography was created. It was called the Diffie-Hellman key exchange, even though you see like 3 people in the picture. The one on the left is Merkle. People who are kind of Ethereum developers probably know about Merkle trees, so that guy over there is he created that concept, right? And then Hellman and DeFi. Why that was a big kind of accomplishment was that it was considered impossible. The problem of creating a secure connection in a public domain where nothing is secure, that problem was considered impossible until they created a solution and solved it. And in the current time, we basically, if you ever visit a website or use any sort of a messaging app, you probably interacted with some sort of a public key cryptography. Obviously, this is a Ethereum conference, so everybody actually has direct interactions with it, with this concept. We all have wallets. The wallets have private keys. We have public keys, essentially the addresses. So this was kind of the core technology that we use daily that was created by these guys that we don't often talk about, right? Essentially, they built kind of the foundation of the cryptographic primitives we use right now. One interesting thing to talk about when we go back to the 70s and 80s, and even really 90s, is that cryptography was illegal, right? It was basically deemed as you were developing weapons. And if you would to develop a cryptographic algorithm and share that, essentially the US government will say that you were trying to distribute technologies and weapons. One of the kind of loopholes that people back then were using, they were actually like printing cryptographic code and algorithms on books and trying to argue that the free speech and the First Amendment is kind of protecting them to do that. Up until 1996, basically, there was the struggle of essentially people wanting to work on cryptography. While this sounds kind of unrealistic in today's age, we obviously see kind of similar patterns with what we have right now. We have a rise of protocols like PGP, Pretty Good Privacy, which basically realized that the only cryptographic algorithms were available to governments and big corporations, and they wanted to develop systems that regular users could encrypt their messages and have any sort of privacy online, right? So there was an emergence of a group called cypherpunks. So it's not cyberpunks, it's cipher. Cipher basically means like an algorithm or a tool to encrypt or decrypt. Also, it's not CryptoPunks, that's the NFT, so cypherpunks. If you Google that, it will say an individual who is a strong believer in anonymity and privacy while using the internet. It doesn't really paint the whole picture. Essentially, it was a group of geeks in a room, which is kind of the most terrifying thing you can have as an enemy. And the US government quickly found out. They quickly moved out from the mom's basement or the room and started a mailing group where people wanted to develop, share, and distribute cryptographic algorithms and protocols so the users, everyday users, could have anonymity, privacy, and obviously a lot of other things that we get with it. The whole idea was that if we let the government be the only distributor of cryptographic secrets and they hold essentially all the keys, they will hold all the keys, right? And nothing will be private, and obviously everything we're doing today would not be possible. There was also the mailing list where people were, like I said, talking, but there was a cypherpunks manifesto, essentially kind of a document where they wrote all the different ideas and how they see their community kind of battling and what were kind of the core principles. I put here kind of just one quote from it, but as you might see, like privacy and anonymity was something that they care deeply about a long time ago. And now in 2024, we obviously see kind of the stuff they were worrying about and fighting for kind of coming together and actually being a worthwhile battle, right? In today's age, our data is worth a lot and mined by big corporations and governments, and we really need to kind of fight to have primitives where we can have privacy and anonymity online. Okay, so we talked a little bit about kind of the history even before Bitcoin, and we talked about the cypherpunks, right? Even before that, or kind of in the middle of creation of Bitcoin and cypherpunks, there were a lot of attempts to create a peer-to-peer digital currency, or a digital currency, right? Even in the early cypherpunk meetups and ideas, they were talking about concepts like that. One of the cypherpunk's early members was actually a creator of eCash and so on. One thing that, and why the year 2009 and the Bitcoin white paper is so critical, and we often talk about it, essentially because all the other applications before that trying to do the same thing failed. And essentially they were missing that secret ingredients, and that was decentralized trust, right? Because sooner or later, every other of the attempts before Bitcoin, they kind of failed, they were shut down, they didn't have, they had some aspects of cryptographic primitives there, but they didn't solve the key feature, and that's decentralized trust. And that's something that the Bitcoin white paper introduced in 2009, and obviously, 15 years later, we still have a Bitcoin as a kind of decentralized currency that's working really well. Obviously, we're at ETH Belgrade, so I'm gonna talk about Ethereum also. I think kind of the second largest impact in this area was the Ethereum white paper in 2014. If people here haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's actually, even if you're not a technical person, it's kind of a really nice read, and you can get a lot from it. Essentially, as I explained to most people, the core idea was Bitcoin is used to be a digital currency. Obviously, the blockchain technology and having decentralized trust is something that's worthwhile in other industries as well. And that was kind of the core idea of Ethereum. Let's build a platform where we can create all sorts of use cases where it requires decentralized trust. Okay, so one of the reasons I mentioned the cypherpunks as well was, if we really think about it, it was not just the cryptographic primitives and the technologies they built, like the public key encryption, hashing functions, and so on. The technology was obviously very fundamental for us to have cryptocurrencies and crypto technology right now. But one of the interesting points is that we couldn't really even start to build any of this if 20, 30 years ago, cryptography was still illegal, right? So one of the big kind of struggles the cypherpunks did for us is actually a lot of them, went to courts, went to jail, because they really believed in the aspects of anonymity, privacy, and decentralization. They really fought to build and leave us the building blocks so the next generation can build the Bitcoins and the Ethereums. Okay, so let's get back to the original question, and that was, have we failed? And because we obviously haven't failed that much, let's see, have we lived up to the expectations? And essentially, to put it in short, my opinion, and I'm overly positive about this, is that we have lived up to expectations. I'll talk about the shitty parts afterwards a bit, because that's always interesting to mention. But one of the things, if we look back to the cypherpunk movement and how that was kind of a really small group of people who were using the technology and actually cared about it, now we have millions of people around the world having cryptographic wallets, having private and public keys, having things that are in self-custody, right? The crypto industry kind of made people care and made people use all the things that the cypherpunks were talking about back in the day. Not only that, it's kind of an interesting thing that we kind of take it for granted, but nobody's really questioning the legitimacy whether or not a cryptocurrency should exist, right? Now it's kind of a thing that obviously it's a thing, and we kind of take it for granted that, 15 years back, it was kind of this crazy idea that nobody believed in it. So, my opinion personally, we are kind of pushing the cypherpunks vision a lot further. Obviously, we can go back and think about all the scams and the hypes that this industry created, but all that provided also the funding and the brain power for people to develop new cryptographic primitives, right? I think in no point of time in history did people invest, more money, time, and power into building cryptographic systems than now, right? Because we have the cryptocurrencies. Okay, so obviously, like I mentioned before, like there are some bad things, and we all know about it. I usually don't, like when I'm speaking to someone who's new in the space, I don't mention this stuff. I'm trying to get them in the cult, right? But when we're in the kind of room of like-minded people and people who already kind of know the core values and ideas, it's always good to look back and actually talk about the stuff that are not so great, right? So if we look at the statement, banking done banked, we can kind of look and see, like, is this technology currently used by, first world people the most, rich people the most, or kind of tech savvy people, or is it used by actually people who do not have access to the banks, right? We can talk about, obviously we had and still have, a lot of hype and scams, and the other industries kind of looking down sometimes at crypto as something that is kind of filled with cheap hype and scams, basically, right? So all that's kind of real, and we cannot just talk about decentralized values while at the same time in the current ecosystem we see a lot of these things as well. One thing that I wanted to mention about, because in the past year basically everybody was talking about ETFs, and it kind of ties into that concept of like going mainstream, right? Kind of the Wall Street people finally accepting us. So you kind of have two different currency in the ecosystem of like, is it good or bad, right? Obviously, it's good for short term for the price. Obviously, everybody on crypto Twitter is all hyped about it, but is it the core thing we wanted to accomplish in the cypherpunk's vision? Like, did we want people to actually use decentralized, open source, permissionless blockchains, or did we want your grandma to invest through an ETF and pump the price, right? Obviously, that's kind of the definition of why I said, failing successfully, because you cannot say that it's a success if we all cherish that an ETF is created. But obviously, that's a big step forward for the industry and kind of the recognition of everybody. What I'm trying to say here is basically that, in my opinion, it is temporarily a good thing, but it isn't the main goal. Like, we should all be aware that people actually owning cryptocurrencies and interacting on-chain with the system is kind of the way it's meant to be used. And it's on us to create the world where it's actually an easier solution and a better solution, and not kind of rely on the mainstream Wall Street kind of types to accept cryptocurrency. I mentioned before, banking than banked, and kind of an interesting thing that if we look at, some of the countries now that have, inflation, one of the most used technologies there is actually, Tron and USDT. Obviously, we're at a Ethereum conference, so I'm guessing not a lot of fans of Tron, so I can easily, talk bad about them here. But let's just say they're not really, peak innovators in this space, and USDT is not exactly the decentralized stablecoin we were promised. One of the things I would like to mention is that, people in the third world countries or in countries with hyperinflation don't really care, right? If it solves their problem, they'll use Tron and any other technologies. One of the reasons why that's a problem is we as a community should build, better technologies that actually have aspects of decentralization and trustlessness and provide them to the people as kind of a better alternative. Obviously, if they're stuck using Tron and USDT, we have failed in that area. And I put here a graph of Terra Luna. Okay, it's not about Terra Luna, it's about the turkey. But you can obviously see the graph is kind of exactly the same, right? The turkey is all fine and well for 1,000 days, and then Thanksgiving comes. And most of the, short-lived blockchains and hype projects we saw in the space kind of had, the same graph. Price goes up, people are happy, nobody thinks about does it have any real value, and then Thanksgiving comes and you're the turkey. Okay, I actually wanted to talk, when we talk about, there's a lot of hype and bullshit in this area, this is one of my favorite lecturers probably ever. People who don't know him, this is Andreas Antonopoulos, one of the early Bitcoin advocates. In 2017, he actually had this great presentation. Everybody should check it out. It's called Blockchain versus Bullshit, right? And as he mentioned in the presentation, they both start with a B. So it's kind of hard to distinguish with it. But he had kind of a nice little heuristic how to determine whether it's a blockchain or it's a bullshit. If you can swap the blockchain word with a database and it sounds exactly the same, it's probably bullshit, right? One of the things I found it interesting, given this talk was kind of the early talks I listened to when I was getting into the space, that kind of the hype words have changed, right? In 2017, people were starting to use the word blockchain and kind of putting everything and anything on the blockchain and kind of using that hype. Currently, we moved on past that hype term. We're using different ones, but kind of the core concept is the same. You can kind of easily tell, is it blockchain or is it bullshit, by essentially seeing if it has any fundamental values. And we talked about the cypherpunks, like does it have any values of trustlessness, open source, decentralizations? If not, it's probably bullshit, right? So when talking about bullshit, I kind of had to put a couple of the key stars in the past few years, the bullshitters here, essentially just to say, fuck them. We can see a few nice pictures of, here's Dekwan in Montenegro enjoying the summertime. You can see the Three Arrow Capital guys also enjoying. Sam Bankman-Fried, right? Here he is on the trial, right? Why I put here false prophets in crypto, it's one of the kind of faults in the industry that we often kind of gather around people who seem that they know what they're doing, and that provides kind of a short-term hype and value, right? None of these people actually really had any sort of resemblance to the cypherpunk vision, right? Building a centralized crypto exchange like SBF did, and trying to hide where the funds are, and essentially building the complete opposite of what the industry was founded to do, and then we're surprised when he rocks, right? It's kind of on us on that one. And also then we're surprised when other people are seeing that and kind of determining that the whole industry is like that. As a community, we definitely should be really careful about who we give attention to, because those people will be kind of in the forefront and representing all of us. Okay, I definitely didn't want to end this presentation on a down note talking about SBF. So one of the positive things right now that I kind of shitted all over everything for the past 10 minutes is technology is getting better. What I mean by that is if you kind of realistically look, and if I remember how I was using Ethereum, 7 years ago, 90% of the stuff I'm using today didn't really existed before. The proof of stake, for instance, that we were promised, years ago, and a lot of development time was put into developing it, is live and it's working really well. Everybody is saying that, Ethereum is a proof of work chain that is bad for the environment and wasting a lot of resources. They don't have kind of any value to say it anymore. Scaling and L2s are now a thing, right? We have decentralized scaling solutions that we were kind of looking forward to build years ago, and cryptography and the ZK proofs and all that kind of came to a point where we can actually perform and build these things. Now, I would be kind of, I have to say about the L2s, one thing, as even though it's a great tech, we have to keep things accountable that I was talking about the cypherpunk visions, and currently most L2s aren't fully decentralized, right? So we have to keep them accountable that even though it's on the right path, we have to essentially have things that abide by the initial visions, or will quickly end up doing kind of the blockchain, and then you put in the database, and if it's the same, if it's just a centralized server, right, we didn't really do anything. The UX is actually getting better. That's essentially became one of the memes in the past, I don't know, 10 years, right, that the crypto UX suck. It's actually getting better, right? We see a lot of account abstractions and a lot of ways that new people who are coming into space don't have to be cryptographic experts to actually use it. Obviously, security and stability, each year we're getting better and better in that as well. So, to wrap it all up, we definitely haven't failed, right? There's a lot of messy parts here. There's a lot of things that we obviously didn't get quite right. But one thing I would like to kind of be the main point of the presentation is actually to look back and think about the cypherpunk vision that came before us and the people who actually fought for cryptography to be legal. That made kind of a community which enabled the whole crypto community to came about. And it's essentially our job, and if you think about it, like the cypherpunks of the current age are actually us, it's the crypto community, and it's on us to kind of leave for the future generation an open, trustless, decentralized system they can build on top of. Because if we don't do that, the next generation of innovations will not come. That's it for me. Thank you all for listening. Yeah.